The War Council chamber smelled of burnt copper and fear. I stood among the 7 high commanders of the Krath'ix Empire, my secondary hearts pounding in irregular rhythm against my rib cage as Supreme Overlord Krath'ix slammed his taloned fist against the holographic display. "Impossible!" he roared, his voice echoing off the obsidian walls. "A single settlement, defended by—" What did the scout say again? Commander Veshra, his scales dulled with age and too many campaigns, cleared his throat. A sound like rocks grinding together. "Farmers, my lord. Agricultural colonists. 23 adults, 14 juveniles. No military installation, no defensive grid. No weapon signatures beyond basic hunting tools." I watched Krath'ix's face. That magnificent blend of confusion and rage that I'd seen topple planets. We'd conquered 47 systems in the last decade alone. We'd crushed the militant horde of Praxis III. We'd reduced the fortress world of Kelvor to molten slag in less than a solar cycle. And now? Now we were staring at casualty reports from a backwater farming colony that made absolutely no sense whatsoever. "Show me the footage again," Krath'ix demanded, his voice dropping to that dangerous quiet that preceded someone losing their head. Literally, the hologram flickered to life, and I leaned forward despite myself. I'd watched this recording 17 times already, and each viewing left me more disturbed than the last. The timestamp read 3 standard days ago, local time on a worthless rock these humans called New Haven. Our advanced strike force, the legendary Black Fang Battalion, descended in their dropships with the kind of precision that had made them the most feared unit in the Empire. 50 warriors, the best, armed with plasma rifles, kinetic accelerators, and enough firepower to level a city block. Their mission? Simple. Eliminate the settlement, secure the location, prepare for the main fleet's arrival. A routine operation. The kind we'd executed hundreds of times before without losing a single soldier. I watched Commander Zalthorn. May his spirit find rest in the void, lead his troops toward the cluster of primitive wooden structures. The humans had built their homes in a clearing, surrounded by fields of some golden crop that swayed in the breeze like waves on an ocean. Peaceful, pathetic, easy. That's when everything went sideways, as the humans like to say. The first warning came from Scout Vexilin. His voice crackled over the comm, high-pitched with something that sounded suspiciously like panic. "Movement. Western perimeter." "I see. Wait, what is that? It looks like... Is that a child?" And there she was. A human juvenile. Couldn't have been more than 8 standard years by my estimation, stepping out from behind one of the structures. She had that copper-colored hair that some humans grow, tied back in what I'd learned was called a ponytail, and she wore simple blue garments covered in dirt stains. In her arms, she carried something small and furry. Some kind of earth animal, I assumed. "Hold positions," Zalthorn ordered, his tactical mind clearly processing this unexpected variable. It's just a juvenile. Probably doesn't even understand what's happening. But I'd studied humans for 3 full cycles before this invasion. I'd read their histories, watched their entertainment transmissions, analyzed their psychological profiles. And one thing I'd learned: human juveniles were never just anything. They were unpredictable chaos wrapped in deceptively innocent packaging. The girl walked forward with the kind of confidence that should have been our first warning. No fear, no hesitation. She stopped maybe 20 meters from our front line, set down whatever animal she'd been holding. It looked like something they called a rabbit. And then she did something that made my blood run cold, even in the recording. She smiled. Not a friendly smile. Not the innocent grin of a child who didn't comprehend the danger standing before her. This was something else entirely. This was the smile of someone who knew exactly what was about to happen and found it deeply amusing. "I'd run if I were you," she called out, her voice carrying across the field with surprising clarity. "You've made Mama really angry. And when Mama gets angry, she sends Rex." Zalthorn laughed. I could hear it clearly in the recording, that dismissive chuckle that preceded his fatal mistake. A child and her pet. This is what defends the human colony. Pathetic. Someone grab the juvenile. We'll use her to make the adults compliant. 3 soldiers moved forward, weapons lowered but ready. Standard intimidation protocol. They never even made it halfway. The ground shook. I mean, literally shook. The camera feeds showed seismic readings spiking across every sensor, and then we all saw it. The trees at the forest edge began to sway, not from wind, but from something massive moving between them. Something that made the battle-hardened warriors of the Black Fang Battalion take an involuntary step backward. It emerged from the shadows like something out of a nightmare. 4 meters tall at the shoulder, maybe more. Covered in thick, shaggy fur that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. The head was massive, broad and powerful, with ears that swiveled independently and eyes that glowed with an intelligence that no simple beast should possess. Its teeth, visible even from the distance the cameras captured, were each as long as my forearm. "Open fire!" Zalthorn screamed, and to their credit, the Black Fang Battalion responded instantly. Plasma bolts lit up the afternoon sky. Kinetic rounds tore through the air with supersonic cracks, and enough ordnance to demolish a fortified bunker converged on the creature. The beast didn't even flinch. It walked through the barrage like a stroll through summer rain, each step measured and deliberate. The weapons fire that should have reduced it to component atoms simply dissipated against something, some kind of field or barrier that the sensors couldn't even identify. Our most advanced scanners registered nothing. No shield technology, no energy signature, nothing that explained why plasma capable of melting through ship armor was having zero effect. "Fall back! Fall back!" Zalthorn's voice had lost all its command authority, replaced by pure survival instinct. But the creature was already moving, and when it moved with a speed that defied its size. The first soldier never saw it coming. One moment he was retreating, weapon firing continuously. The next he was airborne, sent flying by a casual swipe of one massive paw. He hit a tree 30 meters away with enough force that the impact registered on seismic sensors. He didn't get up. What followed wasn't a battle. It was a demonstration, a lesson, a very clear message about what happens when you threaten something this creature had been sent to protect. It moved through our forces like a natural disaster given form and purpose. Each action precise and devastatingly effective. Soldiers scattered, their training forgotten, their courage evaporated. And through it all, that little girl just stood there watching, her smile never wavering. I watched Krath'ix's face as the recording played. The purple tint to his scales deepened, a sure sign of rising blood pressure and impending violence. When the footage reached the part where the beast grabbed 3 soldiers simultaneously and tossed them into the nearby stream with almost playful ease, he made a sound I'd never heard from him before, something between a growl and a whimper. 15 casualties, Commander Veshera reported quietly. 23 wounded. The rest fled back to the dropships in complete disarray. Zalthorn, his body was recovered, but the medical team says the psychological trauma would have required months of treatment, even if he'd survived the physical injuries. "What happened then?" Krath'ix demanded. "After our forces retreated?" Veshera manipulated the hologram, fast-forwarding to footage captured by a surveillance drone that had remained hidden in the upper atmosphere. We all watched as the massive creature, having thoroughly routed our advance force, walked calmly back to where the girl stood waiting. And then, in a moment that had sparked 3 days of heated debate among our tactical analysts, the creature did something that defied every principle of predator behavior, military logic, and basic physics we understood. It sat down, just sat, like an obedient pet. This 4-meter-tall engine of destruction that had just demolished 50 of our finest warriors lowered itself to the ground, positioned its massive head near the girl's shoulder, and went completely still, docile, calm. as if the last 10 minutes of controlled mayhem had never happened. The girl reached up, her small hand barely covering a fraction of the beast's snout, and scratched, behind one of those independently swiveling ears. The creature's eyes closed in what could only be described as contentment. Then she spoke, and the drone's audio sensors picked up every word with crystal clarity. "Good boy, Rex. Such a good boy. I knew you'd keep them away from the farm." She paused, looked directly at the camera, and we all knew she couldn't possibly see it. It was too high, too small, too well hidden, and added, "Tell whoever's watching that Mama says they should probably leave. We just want to grow our crops and live in peace. But if you come back trying to hurt people again, well, Rex has 6 siblings, and they're much less friendly than he is." The recording ended. Silence filled the War Council chamber like a physical presence. I could hear my own breathing, amplified by the acoustic properties of the obsidian walls. Could hear the soft hum of the holographic projectors. Could hear Krath'ix's claws scraping slowly across the tactical table's surface. "Analysis," he finally said, his voice dangerously soft. "Someone explained to me how a species that barely achieved faster-than-light travel 50 of their years ago, who we've classified as technologically inferior in every measurable category, who shouldn't pose even a moderate threat to our expansion. Someone explained how they have genetically engineered or technologically created creatures that can shrug off our most advanced weapons like they're nothing more than annoying insects." I cleared my throat. All eyes turned to me, and I suddenly wished I'd kept my mouth shut. But too late now. "Supreme Overlord, with respect, I don't believe these creatures were genetically engineered or technologically created, at least not by the humans." Krath'ix's eyes narrowed. "Explain, quickly." "I've been studying human culture for 3 cycles, as you know. Part of my research involved their primitive information networks, their entertainment transmissions, their historical records. And there's a pattern that keeps appearing across multiple cultures throughout their entire recorded history. Stories about massive, powerful creatures that bond with humans. Legends of dire wolves and great bears that fought alongside warriors. Tales of dragons that chose specific individuals to protect. Myths of guardians that appeared when needed most." "Myths," Veshra scoffed. "Children's stories, primitive superstition." "That's what I thought too," I admitted, until I cross-referenced these stories with geological records, fossil evidence, and genetic databases they've made publicly available. "Commander, these creatures existed. Multiple species, across different eras of their planet's history. Most went extinct during various cataclysmic events, but some appear to have survived in isolated populations, remote regions, places humans rarely ventured until recently." Krath'ix leaned forward, his interest clearly piqued despite his anger. "You're suggesting this, Rex, is a naturally occurring species from Earth?" "I'm suggesting something more complicated than that, my lord. You see, humans have this peculiar ability. They call it domestication. Over thousands of their years, they've taken wild, dangerous predators and turned them into companions. Creatures called dogs descended from wolves, cats from wildcats, horses from prehistoric runners. They have an almost supernatural talent for forming bonds with other species, for earning loyalty from beings that should, by all logic, see them as prey." I pulled up another file, footage I'd collected from human data streams. It showed a small human child, younger than the girl from New Haven, playing with something called a German shepherd. The animal was massive compared to the child, easily capable of killing the juvenile with one bite. Yet it played gently, carefully, its entire demeanor one of protective devotion. "Now imagine," I continued, "that instead of a domesticated wolf descendant, humans encountered one of these prehistoric survivors. A creature with intelligence beyond what we'd classify as animal. A being that recognizes something in humans, some quality or frequency or characteristic we don't possess. And imagine that creature, through whatever mechanism, bonds with a human family, especially with their juveniles, who seem to have a particular gift for earning animal trust. You're saying that girl controls a 4-meter apex predator through friendship? Veshura's tone made his skepticism clear. I'm saying that girl has earned the loyalty of something we don't understand through means we can't quantify. And if her warning is accurate, if there are indeed 6 more of these creatures, all presumably bonded to other families in that settlement. I let the implication hang in the air. Krath'ix stood, his full height making him tower over the tactical table. He paced, his tail lashing with agitation. The other commanders wisely remained silent, waiting for the Supreme Overlord's decision. I'd seen him in this state before, that moment of calculation where pride warred with pragmatism. How many human settlements are there on this planet? He asked finally. 17 confirmed, I replied. All agricultural. Total population estimated at 600 humans, give or take. And based on your research, your cultural analysis, your understanding of these creatures, what are the odds that this settlement is the only one with such guardians? I didn't want to answer. Really, truly did not want to say what logic dictated. But Krath'ix was staring at me with those predatory eyes, and lying to the Supreme Overlord was a swift path to a very unpleasant execution. Given the patterns I've observed in human colonization, their tendency to take animals with them when they settle new worlds, and the clear indication that these creatures breed successfully, I'd estimate a 70 to 80% probability that multiple settlements have similar guardians. Maybe all of them. The silence that followed was deafening. I watched the implications sink in across every commander's face. If one creature could neutralize 50 soldiers, if these things truly were impervious to our weapons, if humans had scattered them across 17 settlements like living fortresses. What about orbital bombardment? Commander Thexvar suggested, his voice eager with the prospect of simple violence. We could glass the entire planet from orbit, reduce it to molten rock. No creatures, no humans. Problem solved. Krath'ix turned to look at him, and something in that gaze made Thexvar shrink back. And what do you imagine happens when word spreads through the galaxy that the mighty Vrix Empire, conquerors of 47 systems, needed to destroy an entire planet because we were afraid of some animals? What does that do to our reputation? Our intimidation factor? How many other species suddenly think, well, if the Vrix can be stopped by creatures with no weapons, no ships, no technology, perhaps they can be stopped by us as well? Nobody had an answer to that. Because he was right. Our empire's strength wasn't just military. It was psychological. We ruled through fear, through the certainty that resistance was futile. One sign of weakness, one admission that something as primitive as organic predators could stymie our invasion, and the entire carefully constructed edifice of terror we'd built might collapse. So what do we do? Veshura asked quietly. The other commanders expect action. The fleet is positioned. Troops are ready. We can't just leave. Krath'ix returned to the tactical table, his claws tapping a rhythmic pattern on its surface. I'd learned to read his moods over 5 years of service, and right now, he was in what I called his dangerous creativity mode. The state where he came up with plans that were either brilliant or catastrophic, with very little middle ground. We adapt, he said finally. We learn. We approach this differently. He looked at me, and I felt my stomach drop. You've studied these humans. You understand their culture, their psychology. I'm reassigning you. New mission parameters. You will go to this settlement, alone and unarmed. You will make contact with the humans. You will learn about these creatures, determine their weaknesses, and find a way to either neutralize them or turn them to our advantage. My lord, I protested, my voice cracking slightly. I'm a researcher, not a diplomat. I analyze data. I don't negotiate with... Then consider this an expansion of your skill set. Krath'ix interrupted, his tone making it clear that this wasn't a request. You have 3 solar cycles to establish contact and provide actionable intelligence. Fail, and we proceed with Thexvar's orbital bombardment solution. Succeed, and you'll be rewarded beyond your wildest aspirations. Dismissed. The other commanders filed out, leaving me standing alone in the War Council chamber, staring at the frozen Image of that little girl and her impossibly powerful guardian. 3 solar cycles, roughly 5 standard days, to somehow convince a settlement of humans who just violently repelled our invasion force that I came in peace. Learn the secrets of prehistoric creatures that could shrug off plasma fire, and find a solution that preserved both the Empire's reputation and my own continued existence. I looked at the girl's smile in the frozen image. That knowing, confident smile that suggested she'd planned every moment of the encounter. And I realized something that made my blood run even colder than before. She was 8 years old, maybe 9. A human juvenile who'd orchestrated the defeat of our most elite military unit with the casual ease of someone who'd done this before. Who'd known exactly how to position herself, how to deliver her warning, how to make her point without wasting a single word or gesture. If their children were this tactically sophisticated, this utterly fearless in the face of overwhelming force, what would the adults be like? I had 5 days to find out. 5 days to solve a puzzle that had already cost us 15 lives and our military reputation. 5 days before either I found answers or the entire planet burned. Looking at that frozen smile, I had a terrible feeling that the girl knew exactly what my mission would be. Almost like she'd anticipated it, like she was waiting for someone just like me to come knocking on her door, seeking answers to questions I didn't even know how to properly ask. 5 days. Starting now. I really wished I'd chosen a different career path. Maybe something safe and boring, like asteroid mining or waste reclamation. Anything that didn't involve walking voluntarily into a settlement guarded by giant prehistoric predators controlled by terrifyingly competent children. But orders were orders, and if there was one thing the Krath'ix Empire didn't tolerate, it was cowardice in the face of duty. Even when duty looked suspiciously like a suicide mission wrapped in diplomatic packaging. The hologram finally shut down, plunging the chamber into relative darkness. I stood there for a moment longer, gathering my courage, preparing my arguments, and trying very hard not to think about the fact that Rex had 6 siblings. 6 siblings, all less friendly than him. This was either going to be the breakthrough discovery of my career or a very short, very violent final chapter. And somehow, staring into that little girl's knowing smile, I suspected she already knew which one it would be. Time to find out. The shuttle ride down to New Haven felt like descending into my own grave. I sat alone in the passenger compartment. No weapons, no armor. Just my standard research uniform and a datapad loaded with translation software that probably wouldn't help me one bit. The pilot, a grizzled veteran named Krath'ix, kept shooting me sympathetic looks through the cockpit window. The kind of looks you give someone before their execution. "You want me to stay in orbit?" he asked over the comm, his voice carrying genuine concern. "Just in case things go wrong?" "If things go wrong, Krath'ix, your shuttle won't make any difference whatsoever. But yes, stay close. If I'm not dead within the first hour, I'll signal you." "Comforting," he muttered, banking the shuttle toward the coordinates I'd provided. The settlement appeared below us, those primitive wooden structures arranged in a rough circle around a central gathering area. Fields stretched out in every direction, golden crops swaying peacefully in the afternoon breeze. It looked absolutely, deceptively, dangerously idyllic. We landed about 200 meters from the nearest building, in an open field that gave me clear sight lines in every direction. Standard tactical positioning, though I suspected it would matter exactly 0 if those creatures decided I was a threat. I stood at the shuttle's ramp for a solid minute, breathing deeply, trying to calm my racing hearts. "Any last words?" Krath'ix asked, and I could hear the dark humor masking his worry. "Tell my clan I died doing something monumentally stupid for the glory of the Empire." "Will do. Good luck, researcher. You're going to need it." The ramp closed behind me, and suddenly I was alone on an alien world, surrounded by potential hostiles, protected by nothing but my wits and a desperate hope that humans valued curiosity over revenge. The shuttle lifted off, ascending to a safe altitude, leaving me standing in a field of something that looked like wheat but smelled faintly of cinnamon. I waited, figured it was better to let them come to me than to go barging into their settlement uninvited. Show respect, demonstrate non-aggression, hope they didn't simply sick their guardians on me for sport. 5 minutes passed, then 10. The sun beat down on my scales, warm and pleasant. Birds, actual earth birds that humans had imported, sang in the nearby trees. Everything was peaceful and calm, and my danger instincts were screaming that this was all very, very wrong. Then I heard it. Footsteps. Multiple sets, moving through the crops with deliberate noise. They wanted me to hear them coming, wanted me to know I was surrounded before I ever saw them. Psychological warfare, human style. They emerged from the fields like ghosts materializing into reality. 7 adults, moving in a loose formation that somehow managed to be both casual and tactically sound. They carried tools, not weapons. Farming implements that could probably cave in my skull just as effectively as any plasma rifle. And in the center of the group, holding the hand of a tall woman with silver-streaked hair, walked the girl from the recording. She looked even younger in person. More innocent if you ignored the calculating intelligence in her eyes as she studied me with the intensity of a scientist examining an interesting specimen. The woman beside her, presumably the mother she'd mentioned, had the kind of weathered face that spoke of hard work and harder decisions. She smiled at me, warm and welcoming, which somehow made her infinitely more terrifying than any snarl would have been. "Hello there," the woman called out, her voice carrying easily across the distance. "You must be from that ship that's been orbiting for the past few days. We've been wondering when someone would come down to talk." I activated my translation implant, heard the device render her words into something my brain could process naturally. Time to test my research on human social protocols. "Greetings. I am Senior Researcher Vixthrin of the Vrix Empire. I come unarmed and alone, seeking dialogue and understanding. I apologize for the unpleasantness of our previous encounter." The group stopped about 20 meters away, maintaining what I recognized as a comfortable conversation distance for humans. The girl whispered something to her mother, who nodded and whispered back. Then the child stepped forward, releasing her mother's hand, walking toward me with that same unnerving confidence I'd seen in the recording. "I'm Lily," she announced, stopping about 5 meters away. Close enough to talk comfortably, far enough that she could run if needed. Smart positioning from someone so young. "That's my mom, Emma. The tall guy with the beard is my dad, Marcus. The others are our neighbors. You're the first alien I've ever met. Are all your species purple? Or just you?" The casual shift from potential combat situation to curious interrogation caught me off guard. We range from deep purple to almost blue, depending on our clan lineage. Your species shows similar variation, I understand. Different skin tones, hair colors, eye colors across your population." "Cool," Lily said, grinning. "Did you come to apologize for trying to attack us, or are you here to scout for another invasion?" Direct. Brutally direct. I appreciated that, even as it made my situation more precarious. Lying to this child seemed both morally wrong and tactically foolish. Both, honestly. My superiors want intelligence on your defenses. But personally, I want to understand how you accomplished what you did. How you turned back a military force that has conquered dozens of worlds. Lily's mother, Emma, stepped forward now, her expression shifting from welcoming to something harder, more protective. "Let me make something very clear, researcher. We didn't come to this planet looking for a fight. We're farmers, colonists, people who just wanted a fresh start away from Earth's overcrowding and politics. We claimed this world legally, through proper channels, and we've harmed exactly nobody in the process of settling here." "But you knew we were coming," I said, piecing together the timeline. The girl's positioning, her warning, the way she deployed Rex so efficiently. That wasn't improvised. That was planned. Of course it was planned. Marcus spoke up, his deep voice rumbling like distant thunder. You think we didn't notice when a warship entered our system 3 weeks ago? When scouting vessels started mapping our settlements? We're colonists, not idiots. We knew someone would come eventually. We just hoped it would be traders or explorers, not conquerors. 3 weeks. They'd had 3 weeks to prepare, and they'd used that time to set a trap that had devastated our forces while making it look effortless. The creatures, I said, getting to the heart of my mission. Rex and his siblings, where did they come from? How did you acquire them? What are they? Lily's face lit up with the kind of enthusiasm only children achieve when discussing their favorite topic. They're dire wolves. Well, technically they're Canis magnificus, which is Latin for magnificent dog, which is exactly what they are. We found them when we were surveying the northern forests. There was a whole pack, maybe 20 of them, living in these caves near a geothermal vent. They'd survived there for who knows how long, probably since the last ice age on their original planet. Wait, I interrupted, my researcher brain suddenly very alert. Original planet? You're saying these creatures aren't native to Earth? Emma shook her head, and I saw something like wonder cross her face. We don't think so. The genetic markers don't match anything in Earth's evolutionary tree. Best guess from our science team is that they're from a planet with similar conditions to Earth, maybe brought here accidentally by some previous spacefaring species millions of years ago. Or maybe they evolved parallel to Earth's wolves through convergent evolution on another world. We honestly don't know. But they bonded with you, I pressed, fascinated despite the danger. How? Why? What makes humans special to these creatures? Lily giggled, actually giggled, like I'd asked something adorable instead of mission critical. We're not special, not really. It's just, well, have you ever had a pet? Something you cared for that cared for you back? The Vrix don't keep animals for companionship, I admitted. We consider it inefficient, wasteful of resources. That's sad, Lily said, with such genuine sympathy that it stung more than any insult. See, humans figured out a long time ago that we're better when we're not alone. Dogs, cats, horses, birds, even fish and reptiles. We bond with animals because it makes us happy. Makes them happy too. And these dire wolves, they're smart. Really, really smart. They understand emotions, read body language, sense intentions. When we found them, they were curious about us. Cautious, but curious. Marcus picked up the story, his voice softening with the memory. We spent weeks just sitting near their territory. No sudden moves, no loud noises. Just being present, patient. Eventually, one of the younger ones approached Emma, sniffed her hand, let her touch his fur, and that was it. That was the beginning. They chose us, Emma added quietly. We didn't capture them or train them. We offered friendship, respect, and they decided we were worth protecting. Each wolf bonded with a different family. Rex chose us, specifically chose Lily. The moment they met, it was like watching two souls recognize each other. I struggled to process this information through my Vrix worldview. Friendship with predators. Mutual bonds based on emotion rather than utility. It violated every principle of logical species interaction we'd developed. And yet, the evidence of its effectiveness had demolished 15 of our soldiers and sent the rest fleeing in terror. Your weapons, I said, shifting topics. Our plasma fire, our kinetic rounds, they had no effect on Rex. What kind of shielding technology are you using? The humans exchanged glances, and I saw something pass between them. Amusement, pity. Then Lily spoke, and her words sent ice through my veins. There's no technology, no shields or barriers or force fields. Rex just didn't care about your weapons. Impossible. Our plasma can melt through ship armor. The kinetic rounds can punch holes in reinforced concrete. No organic being should be able to... Should, Emma interrupted gently. That's the key word, isn't it? Should, based on your understanding of biology, physics, and reality. But researcher, The universe is a lot stranger than any of us give it credit for. These wolves evolved, or were created, or somehow came into being on a world where survival meant adapting to extreme conditions. Their hide isn't just thick, it's molecularly dense in ways our scientists are still trying to understand. And their bones, their internal structure, it's like they're built from compressed matter. Your weapons weren't ineffective, they just weren't powerful enough. Nothing in our arsenal is powerful enough? I asked, hearing the desperation creep into my voice. Probably not, Marcus said bluntly. Which is why we're hoping you'll convince your superiors to leave us alone. We don't want a war. We don't want to be part of your empire. We just want to grow our crops, raise our families, and live in peace. But if you force the issue, if you keep attacking... He trailed off, letting the implication hang heavy in the air. The girl mentioned 6 siblings, I said quietly. How many wolves are there in total? 23, Lily answered cheerfully. We only bonded with 7 families so far, but the others are still nearby, still watching, still protecting their territory, which now includes our settlements because we're packed now. We're family. 23. Not 7 guardians, but 23 apex predators with apparently impenetrable hides and strength that defied physics. Scattered across this planet, bonded to humans through incomprehensible emotional connections, ready to defend their adopted pack against any threat. Krath'ix's plan to conquer this world wasn't just difficult. It was genuinely, mathematically, physically impossible. Unless we were willing to glass the entire planet from orbit, which would defeat the purpose of conquest and destroy our reputation simultaneously. I need to meet Rex, I said suddenly, the words tumbling out before I fully thought them through. I need to understand, not as a military threat to be neutralized, but as a phenomenon to be comprehended. It's the only way I can convince my superiors that this world isn't worth the cost of taking it. The humans conferred quietly among themselves, a huddle of whispered conversations and meaningful looks. I stood there, feeling extremely vulnerable and extremely alien, watching these creatures who'd somehow mastered the art of turning natural predators into loyal companions debate whether to let me near their greatest defense. Finally, Emma nodded and turned back to me. All right, but I'm warning you now, researcher. Rex is gentle with those he trusts, and absolutely merciless with those he perceives as threats. Lily will introduce you, and you'll follow her instructions exactly. No sudden movements, no aggressive postures, and for the love of everything you hold sacred, don't try to touch him unless he invites it. Understood? Understood, I agreed, wondering what my ancestors would think of their descendant taking orders from an 8-year-old human on proper etiquette for meeting a prehistoric super predator. Lily grabbed my hand, her small fingers wrapping around my much larger ones with surprising strength. Come on. Rex is napping in the barn. He likes to sleep on the hay bales where it's cool. You're going to love him. He's the best boy in the whole universe. She led me toward the settlement, chattering away about Rex's favorite foods, his sleeping habits, the way he liked to play fetch with logs instead of sticks, and approximately 700 other details that painted a picture of the most dangerous creature I'd ever encountered as essentially a gigantic, indestructible puppy. The barn was larger than I expected, built from local timber that smelled pleasantly of sap and age. Lily pushed open the door, sunlight streaming into the dim interior, illuminating motes of dust and the massive shape sprawled across a pile of hay in the far corner. Rex was even larger in person than the recordings had suggested. 4 meters at the shoulder translated to an absolutely massive presence when you were standing in the same enclosed space. His fur, that light-absorbing black I'd noted before, rippled slightly with his breathing. One ear twitched at our entrance, but he didn't open his eyes. Rex, Lily called softly, we have a visitor. Someone who wants to meet you properly. The ear twitched again. Then, slowly, with the deliberate movements of someone who'd been comfortable and didn't appreciate the interruption, Rex lifted his head and opened his eyes. I'd seen predators before, studied dozens of species across multiple worlds, but nothing. Absolutely nothing had prepared me for the intelligence I saw in those eyes. They weren't the eyes of an animal operating on instinct and training. These were the eyes of something that thought, evaluated, and judged. And right now, those eyes were judging me with the intensity of a tribunal deciding my fate. "This is Vixthrin," Lily said, pronouncing my name better than most of my own species managed. "He's from the ship in orbit. He wants to understand us, Rex. Wants to help his people understand that we're not their enemies." Rex stood up, and the barn suddenly felt much, much smaller. He moved forward, each step deliberate and measured, until he stood directly in front of me. His head, at full height, towered over mine. He lowered his snout, and I felt warm breath wash over my scales as he sniffed me, analyzing my scent, probably gathering information through senses I didn't fully understand. "Don't move," Lily whispered, unnecessary advice since I was currently frozen in place by pure survival instinct. "Let him get to know you." The sniffing continued, moving from my head down to my torso, Rex's massive nose almost touching my uniform. Then he did something completely unexpected. He sat down, bringing his head to roughly my eye level, and made a sound that I could only describe as a questioning rumble. "He wants to know if you mean us harm," Lily translated. "If you're here to hurt me or my family." I looked into those impossibly intelligent eyes and decided that lying, even if I could pull it off, would be the absolute worst decision I could make. "I don't want to hurt anyone," I said honestly. "I came here because my superiors sent me, because they want this world and they see you as obstacles to be removed. But I don't want that. I never wanted that. I just want to study, to learn, to understand things I've never encountered before. And you, Rex, you're the most extraordinary thing I've ever seen in my entire life." Rex held my gaze for what felt like an eternity. Then, he did something that would have made every scientist in the Vrix Empire question their fundamental understanding of animal behavior. He nodded. A clear, unmistakable gesture of acknowledgement and acceptance. "He likes you," Lily announced, grinning. "You can touch him if you want. Just be gentle. His fur is really thick, and sometimes people pull too hard without meaning to." With a hand that trembled slightly, I reached out and touched Rex's head. The fur was indeed thick, dense beyond anything I'd felt before, like running my fingers through warm steel wool. But beneath that impossible hide, I could feel warmth, life, the steady rhythm of a heartbeat that resonated with surprising gentleness. "I'm going to tell my superiors that this world is not worth the cost," I said quietly, speaking to both Lily and Rex. "That conquering it would require resources and casualties that far exceed any strategic value. They won't like it, but the truth is undeniable. Your wolves, your guardians, they've created a defense that our military can't overcome without destroying the very thing we'd be trying to claim." "Will they listen?" Lily asked, her child's directness cutting through diplomatic niceties. "I don't know," I admitted, "but I'll make them understand. Somehow." Rex made another rumbling sound, this one almost approving. Then he did something that absolutely destroyed my composure. He leaned forward and gently, incredibly gently, licked my face with a tongue the size of a dinner plate. Lily burst into giggles. "He really likes you. He only does that to people he trusts." I stood there, covered in wolf saliva, feeling the weight of a 4-meter predator's affection, and realized something profound. The Vrix Empire had conquered 47 systems through superior technology, military might, and ruthless efficiency. We'd built our power on the principle that strength always triumphed over weakness, that advancement always overcame primitive cultures. But we'd never encountered something like this. We'd never faced an enemy that won not through superior weapons or tactics, but through bonds we couldn't comprehend, connections we'd never valued, and a strength that came from unity rather than domination. "There's a lesson here," I said, more to myself than to Lily. "Something my people need to learn, about the value of connection, about strength that comes from trust rather than fear. Yeah, Lily agreed, scratching behind Rex's ear in that spot that made his massive leg thump against the barn floor. But you know what? Some lessons are hard to teach. Some people only understand force, only respect power. So if your bosses don't listen to your report, if they decide to come back with bigger weapons and more soldiers. She looked up at me, and for just a moment, I saw that terrifying calculation return to her young eyes. Well, you've met one wolf. You've seen what he can do. But you haven't seen what 23 can do when they're working together. Haven't seen what happens when humans and wolves defend their home as a true pack. It wasn't a threat. Not exactly. It was a simple statement of fact, delivered with the confidence of someone who'd already run the scenarios and knew how they ended. And looking at Rex, feeling the power barely contained within that massive frame, I believed every word. I returned to the shuttle 3 hours later, my mind full of observations, my datapad loaded with recordings and notes, and my worldview fundamentally altered. Krath'ix nearly collapsed with relief when I walked up the ramp. "You're alive," he gasped. "By the void, you're actually alive. And is that saliva?" "Long story," I muttered, strapping into my seat. "Take us up. I have a report to deliver that's going to change everything." "Good news?" "For the humans. Yes, for the Empire. That depends entirely on how willing Supreme Overlord Krath'ix is to accept that we've finally found something we can't conquer." The flight back to the flagship was silent. I spent the entire time organizing my thoughts, preparing my arguments, and trying to figure out how to explain to a warlike species that sometimes the smartest thing you can do is walk away. The War Council reconvened 6 hours later. I stood before the same group of commanders, facing the same Supreme Overlord. But this time, I had answers. Whether they'd like those answers was another question entirely. "Report!" Krath'ix demanded, his tone making it clear he expected solutions, not excuses. I took a deep breath and began. "Supreme Overlord, honored commanders, I have completed my reconnaissance of the human settlement. I've met with the colonists, observed their defenses, and most importantly, I've had direct contact with one of the guardian creatures. Based on my findings, I must formally recommend immediate withdrawal from this system and the reclassification of New Haven as a no-conquest zone." The explosion of protest was predictable. Voices overlapped, demanding explanations, accusing me of cowardice, questioning my loyalty. Krath'ix let it continue for exactly 10 seconds before slamming his fist on the table, silencing everyone instantly. "Explain," he said coldly, "and it better be convincing." For the next hour, I laid out everything. The wolves' apparent imperviousness to our weapons. The 23 creatures total versus the 7 we'd encountered. The psychological bond between humans and their guardians that made conventional intimidation tactics useless. The humans' legal claim to the world, which meant attacking further would risk political complications with other spacefaring species who might view us as aggressors rather than conquerors. But most importantly, I concluded, this world has no strategic value worth the cost. It's agricultural, with no rare minerals, no tactical positioning, no technological assets worth claiming. The only reason we targeted it was because it looked easy. But it's not easy, it's impossible. And throwing resources at an impossible target doesn't make us look strong. It makes us look desperate and foolish. Silence. Then Commander Veshra spoke, his voice thoughtful rather than angry. "The researcher makes valid points. We've built our empire on calculated risks, not impossible battles. Perhaps there's wisdom in recognizing our limitations." "Limitations?" Thexfar snarled. "We're the Vrix Empire. We don't have limitations." "Everyone has limitations," I countered, surprised by my own boldness. "The question is whether we're wise enough to recognize them. The humans aren't asking for war. They're not threatening expansion into our territory. They just want to be left alone. Granting them that costs us nothing and demonstrates that our empire is confident enough to choose its battles rather than fighting everything that breathes." Krath'ix studied me for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then, surprisingly, he laughed. Not a mocking laugh, but something genuine, almost impressed. "You've changed, researcher. When you left this ship, you were terrified. Now you're lecturing commanders about strategic wisdom. What happened down there?" "I met something extraordinary," I said simply. "Something that made me realize the universe is bigger and stranger than our conquest maps suggest. And sometimes the smartest move is to acknowledge that and adapt." Another long silence. Then Krath'ix straightened, his decision made. "We withdraw, not because we're afraid, but because this world offers nothing worth the cost of taking it. We'll mark New Haven as an independent settlement and add a notation that its defenses exceed standard assessment parameters. Other species can waste their resources here if they choose. We have 47 systems already, plenty of worlds where our expansion makes sense." Relief flooded through me, so intense I nearly collapsed. "Thank you, Supreme Overlord." "Don't thank me yet," he said darkly. "You're going back down there. You're going to inform the humans of our decision, establish formal diplomatic relations, and set up monitoring protocols. If they expand beyond that one planet, if they start developing military technology using those creatures, we need to know. Consider yourself our permanent ambassador to New Haven." Ambassador, permanent assignment. Away from the fleet, from the constant warfare, from the rigid hierarchy of military life. Living among humans, studying their bonds with impossible predators, learning about connections my species had never valued. It sounded perfect. "I accept," I said immediately, probably too enthusiastically for proper military protocol. Krath'ix waved dismissively. "Dismissed, all of you. We have 46 other systems to manage and actual conquests to plan." As I left the War Council chamber, I felt lighter than I had in years. I was going back to New Haven, back to Lily and Emma and Marcus and Rex, back to a world where strength came from trust and power from unity. The Vrix Empire would continue its expansion elsewhere, conquering worlds that made strategic sense. And one small agricultural colony would remain free, protected not by advanced technology or superior numbers, but by the unbreakable bonds between humans and their savage, gentle, impossibly powerful guardians. Sometimes, I realized, the greatest victory isn't in conquering. It's in knowing when to walk away. It's in recognizing that some things, some connections, some relationships are beyond military solutions. The humans had taught me that. Lily and her magnificent beast had shown me a different kind of strength, one my empire had never encountered before and couldn't hope to overcome. And honestly, I was grateful for the lesson. Even if it came with wolf saliva and a career change I never saw coming. 5 days later, I stood in that same field where I'd first landed, this time with official documents proclaiming New Haven an independent settlement. Lily was there, naturally, with Rex sitting beside her like a mountain, made flesh. Behind them, the other families had gathered, their own wolves present, a show of unity and strength that needed no words. "So you're staying?" Lily asked, grinning up at me. "Apparently I'm your official liaison to the Vrix Empire, which means yes, I'm staying. Someone needs to make sure other species don't make the same mistake we did." "Cool. Rex likes you so you can visit whenever you want. And maybe you can help us understand more about the wolves. We've learned a lot, but there's still so much we don't know. Research, discovery, learning alongside humans instead of conquering them. It was everything I dreamed of when I first chose to become a scientist, before military service had redirected my path. "I'd like that very much," I said honestly. Rex rumbled his approval, and in that sound, I heard something impossible. I heard acceptance. Welcome. The acknowledgement that sometimes the greatest adventures come not from conquest, but from friendship. The Vrix Empire would conquer other worlds, but New Haven would remain free, a small jewel of independence protected by bonds that transcended species, understanding, or logic. And I would be here to witness it all, to learn from it, to maybe, eventually, teach my own people that strength comes in forms we'd never imagined. All because a little girl and her savage beast had shown mercy to an enemy who came seeking understanding instead of war. Sometimes that's all it takes to change everything.